Christmas gifts are only for the grandchildren. Your kids didn't deserve anything.
Then you'll never see us again, because my children are nobody's punchline.
My parents handed every grandchild a gift, except my 2 children. Then my niece laughed and said they didn't earn Christmas. I walked out without making a scene. But the message I sent the next morning ended our family's cruelest tradition for good. Hello, my name is Claire Morgan. I am 38 years old, and I live outside Columbus, Ohio, with my husband Daniel and our 2 children, 12-year-old Ethan and 9-year-old Lily. For most of my life, I believed keeping the peace was the same as protecting my family. I was wrong. Sometimes peace is only silence arranged around the person causing the pain. I learned that lesson on Christmas Eve. Every year, my parents hosted a large family dinner at the house where my sister and I grew up. My mother decorated every doorway with pine garland. My father put white lights across the roof. After dinner, everyone gathered around the tree while he handed out presents one at a time. From the outside, it looked warm and perfect. Inside that house, however, love had always come with a scorecard. My older sister, Vanessa, had been the favorite since childhood. She earned better grades, married a wealthy real estate developer, and had a daughter named Madison who attended an expensive private school. My parents spoke about all 3 of them as if they were a royal family. Daniel and I lived a quieter life. He taught high school science, and I managed operations for a small logistics company. We were not poor, but we did not buy luxury cars or post expensive vacations online. Ethan loved robotics and sometimes became nervous in crowds. Lily was artistic sensitive and happier painting a cardboard box than showing off in a recital. My parents called them ordinary. At first, the insults were small enough to excuse. My mother forgot Lily's school performance, but drove 2 hours to attend Madison's dance competition. My father told Ethan that building robots was playing with toys, then gave Madison $500 for winning a beauty pageant. Whenever I objected, they said I was jealous of Vanessa. So I learned to smile, change the subject, and tell my children that Grandma and Grandpa loved them in their own way. That was my greatest mistake. Children do not hear the excuses adults make. They feel who gets celebrated and who gets tolerated. 3 weeks before Christmas, my mother created a family group chat called Morgan Christmas Magic. She asked each parent to send gift ideas for the grandchildren. I sent a link to an affordable electronics kit for Ethan and a watercolor set for Lily. My mother responded with a thumbs up. Vanessa sent a list for Madison that included designer boots, a new tablet, concert tickets, and a gold necklace. My father replied, "Our star deserves the best." I should have recognized the warning. Instead, I bought thoughtful gifts for everyone, including my parents, Vanessa, her husband, and Madison. Ethan used his allowance to buy Grandpa a book about American trains. Lily painted Grandma's childhood home from an old photograph. On Christmas Eve, snow began falling just before sunset. Daniel loaded our gifts into the car while the children argued happily about who would carry the pie. Before we left, Ethan stood by the front door and asked, "Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa actually want us there?" His question stopped me. "Of course they do," I said too quickly. Daniel looked at me, but he did not contradict me in front of the children. Once they were in the car, he quietly said, "Claire, if anything feels wrong tonight, we leave. No debate." I promised him we would. My parents' driveway was crowded when we arrived. Through the front window, I could see a mountain of presents beneath the tree. Some packages were so large they reached the lower branches. Madison opened the door wearing a red velvet dress. She looked at Lily's handmade gift and said, "Grandma already has real art." Lily lowered the painting. I waited for Vanessa to correct her daughter. Instead, Vanessa laughed and said, "Madison has developed expensive taste." That was the first cut of the evening. Dinner brought several more. My father praised Madison for being accepted into an elite winter leadership program. Then he turned to Ethan. "Any real awards this year?" he asked. Ethan explained that his robotics team had qualified for a statewide competition. My father shrugged. "I meant something people understand." Later, my mother asked Lily whether she was still taking art lessons. "Yes," Lily said. "My teacher put my picture in the library." That is sweet. My mother replied, maybe next year you can try something competitive. I felt Daniel's hand close around mine under the table. He was reminding me of our promise. Still, I stayed. I told myself the children were excited about the presents. I told myself one pleasant moment might save the night. After dinner, we gathered in the living room. My father stood beside the tree wearing the Santa hat he wore every year. He announced a new family tradition. This year, he said, we are rewarding the grandchildren who made the family proud. The room became strangely quiet. My mother began recording with her phone. My father handed Madison the first present, then another, and another. She received the boots, the tablet, the necklace, the tickets, and several other gifts. Vanessa clapped after each one. My parents' smiles grew wider as wrapping paper covered the floor. Ethan and Lily sat together at the end of the couch. At first, they waited patiently. Then Lily searched beneath the tree. Ethan stared at his shoes. When the last large box was opened, my father removed his Santa hat and said, well, Lily looked at me. Maybe ours are behind the tree. My mother lowered her phone. No, sweetheart, she said. Your grandfather and I decided gifts should be earned this year. I could not immediately understand the sentence. Earned, I asked. My father crossed his arms. Madison represents this family well. She is disciplined, social, and successful. Your children need motivation. Daniel stood. They are children. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Please don't ruin Christmas because you dislike honest parenting. Ethan's face had gone pale. Lily was trying not to cry. Then Madison held up her new tablet, looked directly at my children, and laughed. You didn't deserve presents, she said. No one corrected her. My mother actually smiled. Something inside me became completely still. I did not scream. I did not argue. I did not give them the dramatic scene they could later use as proof that I was unstable or jealous. I walked to the tree, collected the gifts we had brought, and placed Ethan's train book and Lily's painting safely on top. My father said, "What do you think you're doing?" "We're going home." My mother stepped in front of me. "Don't be childish, Claire. This lesson is for their own good." I looked at her phone, still recording in her hand. You planned to film their humiliation. For the first time that evening, she had no answer. Daniel helped the children into their coats. Vanessa called after us. "If you leave now, don't expect everyone to chase you." I turned around once. "That is the first kind thing you've offered me tonight." Then we left. No one followed. In the car, Lily began crying. Not loudly. That would have been easier. She pressed her face against the window and let tears slide down silently. Ethan asked, "What did we do wrong?" I felt my heart break because he was not asking whether his grandparents were wrong. He was searching for the defect in himself. "Nothing," I said. "You did absolutely nothing wrong. I did something wrong by keeping you in a place where people made you feel that love had to be earned." Daniel pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot. He turned around and told them the truth. "Your grandparents made a cruel choice. It says something about them, not about you." We sat there as snow covered the windshield. Then Lily whispered, "Can we still have Christmas?" That question gave me a purpose. We drove home, put on pajamas, made hot chocolate, and opened the gifts Daniel and I had bought for the children. Ethan received the electronics kit. Lily received the watercolor set. We ordered pizza because our special dinner was still at my parents' house. Around midnight, the children finally fell asleep in the living room beneath a blanket fort. Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table. "They knew," I said. "They knew exactly what they were doing." He nodded. Yes, that simple answer hurt more than any excuse. My phone showed 17 unread messages. Most were from my mother. "You embarrassed us. You made Madison feel guilty on Christmas. Your father expects an apology." Vanessa sent only one message. "You always punish everyone when you are not the center of attention." Not one person asked whether Ethan and Lily were all right. Then I noticed a video in the group chat. My mother had accidentally uploaded part of her recording. It showed my father announcing that presents had to be earned. It showed Lily searching behind the tree. It captured Madison's laugh and the silence that followed. My first impulse was to send it to everyone we knew. I imagined my parents facing public shame. But I stopped. Revenge that harms a child would only make me resemble the adults who had hurt mine. Madison had behaved cruelly, but she was 14 and had been trained to see kindness as weakness. I downloaded the video and saved it privately. Not for social media. For evidence. At 8 the next morning, my mother let it ring. My father called next, then Vanessa. I opened the family group chat and typed one message. Never invite us again. My children are not your lesson, your entertainment, or your punchline. We will not return until you can offer them a sincere apology and equal respect. Do not contact Ethan or Lily directly. Merry Christmas. Then I left the group and blocked all 3 numbers. For the first time in my life, silence felt like freedom. But the story did not end there. 2 days later, my cousin Rachel called Daniel. She had been at dinner, but had left before the gifts were opened. My parents told her I had screamed at Madison, stolen her presents, and stormed out because my children had received slightly fewer gifts. That was the mystery I should have expected. My parents were not simply defending what they had done, they were rewriting it. Rachel asked Daniel what really happened. With my permission, he sent her the recording. An hour later, she called back crying. "Claire," she said, "your mother planned it." Rachel explained that 2 weeks before Christmas, my mother had asked several relatives whether withholding gifts might inspire children who lacked ambition. Everyone assumed she meant giving smaller presents or setting goals for the coming year. No one knew she intended a public punishment. Then Rachel told me something worse. My parents had originally purchased the electronics kit and watercolor set. She had seen both gifts in their guest room. On Christmas Eve morning, my father returned them to the store. This was not forgetfulness, it was a performance built in advance. I wanted to know why. Rachel hesitated. "Your father is angry that you refused to lend Vanessa money last summer." Suddenly, the entire evening changed shape. 6 months earlier, Vanessa's husband had made a risky investment in a luxury housing project. The deal collapsed, and they needed $80,000 quickly. My parents assumed Daniel and I had a large emergency fund because we lived carefully. Vanessa asked us for the money. We offered to pay for a financial advisor and help them create a recovery plan, but we would not hand over our children's college savings. My father called me selfish. My mother said family loyalty required sacrifice. I believed the disagreement had ended. It had not. They had chosen Christmas Eve to punish my children for a financial boundary I had set. That knowledge removed the last trace of guilt from me. A week later, my father appeared at our house. Daniel saw him through the doorbell camera and told the children to stay upstairs. I spoke through the closed door. "You need to leave. Open this door," my father demanded. "You have turned the family against us. Your own recording did that." He became quiet. "Your mother is sick over this." Is she sick because she hurt 2 children, or because people found out? He never answered. Before leaving, he said, "You will regret cutting yourself off from your inheritance." That was meant to frighten me. Instead, it exposed the last weapon he believed he had. "Keep it," I said. "My children will never have to purchase your approval with their dignity." After he left, my hands shook for several minutes. Courage does not always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels like fear that has finally chosen a direction. During the next month, relatives began learning the truth. I never posted the video publicly. I shared it only when someone repeated my parents' false story. Facts did the work that shouting never could. My aunt canceled a New Year's dinner at my parents' home. Rachel stopped allowing them to compare her children to Madison. Even Vanessa's husband privately apologized to Daniel. He admitted he had not known the Christmas humiliation was connected to the failed loan. Vanessa did not apologize. She sent an email accusing me of destroying the family's reputation. I replied with one sentence, "The truth did not destroy your reputation, your behavior did." Then I blocked her email. The most important change, however, happened inside our home. Ethan began seeing a counselor because he had spent years believing his quiet personality disappointed people. Lily stopped asking why Madison was better than she was. Daniel and I created new family rules: no forced affection, no staying where someone humiliates us, and no pretending cruelty is tradition. The following spring, Ethan's robotics team reached the state finals. As he prepared his machine, he looked into the audience and saw Daniel, Lily, me, and several friends holding homemade signs. His team placed third. On the drive home, he said, "Grandpa would say third is losing." My stomach tightened. Then Ethan smiled. "But I think building something that works is still pretty great." That was the moment I knew he was healing. Lily's library painting was later selected for a county youth exhibition. She did not win a prize. She did not need one. She stood beside her picture with blue paint on her sleeve and joy across her face. We celebrated with ice cream. 10 months after that Christmas, a letter arrived from my mother. It contained no excuses, no accusations, and no request to protect appearances. She wrote that she had started therapy. She admitted using comparison to control both Vanessa and me for most of our lives. She admitted smiling when Madison mocked my children. She said she did not expect forgiveness, but wanted Ethan and Lily to receive handwritten apologies. I showed the letter to Daniel. Then we gave the children a choice. Ethan wanted to read his apology. Lily did not. We honored both decisions. I did not immediately welcome my mother back. An apology can open a door, but it does not rebuild the house. Trust requires repeated action over time. My father never apologized. He continued telling anyone who would listen that I was dramatic and ungrateful. Eventually, Vanessa and I remained apart. I hope she changes one day, especially for Madison's sake. But hope is not the same as access. I can wish someone well without offering them another opportunity to wound my children. The next Christmas Eve, we did not dress formally or drive through the snow to my parents' house. We stayed home. Each of us chose one present for another person. But before opening gifts, we started a new tradition. Everyone said one thing they admired about each family member that had nothing to do with winning, money, appearance, or achievement. Daniel praised Ethan's patience. Ethan praised Lily's imagination. Lily praised Daniel for making people feel safe. Then Lily looked at me. "I admire Mom because she took us home," she said. I had to look away for a moment. All my life, I thought being a good daughter meant enduring pain quietly. That night, my child taught me that being a good mother meant knowing when to walk away. We opened our modest gifts, ate too many cookies, and watched snow settle outside. No one was ranked. No one had to perform. No one wondered whether they had earned a place in the room. And that became my justice. Not ruining my parents, not taking their money, and not humiliating them in return. My revenge was ending the pattern they believed I was too weak to escape. They wanted my children to remember the Christmas when they received nothing. Instead, my children remember the Christmas when their mother finally chose them. And if there is one lesson I carried from that night, it is this: family is not the group that demands your silence while they make you the punchline. Family is the place where no child has to earn love, and where someone is brave enough to close the door on anyone who says otherwise.